Welcome to the deep dive where we put Congress in context.
Our mission is to synthesize the congressional record,
Right.
that, often dizzying, really dense documentation of floor debates and written submissions.
And we pull out the most important knowledge nuggets. We try to connect the monumental, high-stakes decisions happening in Washington, D.C. directly back to the local communities they affect.
Today's deep dive is, it's fundamentally a study in juxtaposition.
That's a great way to put it.
We're dissecting two really intense days of proceedings, January 6th and 7th, 2026. And what we see in the record is just this profound, stark contrast. On one hand, you have constitutional crises, raw, deeply personal emotion, and on the other, you get the meticulous, granular details of where federal money is actually flowing.
All the way down to local library funding and police cruiser replacements.
Exactly.
So we've organized this material around three central themes that I think really define the mood of Congress this week. We're calling them money, memory, and monarchy.
I like that. Money, memory, monarchy.
Right. So money in the form of this massive consolidated appropriations package, H.R. 6938.
Memory, which is embodied in the highly emotional 5-year anniversary commemorations of the January 6th insurrection and that ongoing fight to control the historical narrative.
And monarchy, that's our term for the constitutional alarm bells that are ringing loudly over the president's aggressive and unilateral foreign intervention in Venezuela.
And we'll walk through the procedural mechanics that govern these high-stakes moments.
Yeah.
We'll even get into, the fascinating rare maneuver known as the motion to discharge.
And explain why that procedure is suddenly so vital to the healthcare debate.
Precisely. But most importantly, we will zero in on that local impact, using the record to show you exactly what federal spending is funding in your town and what local leaders are choosing to highlight, whether it's on the floor or through these formal written tributes.
Okay, let's unpack this enormous legislative week. We're jumping right into Section 1, the legislative landscape and procedural mechanics.
Let's do it.
So the fiscal centerpiece of this week's legislative activity, the foundation on which so much of the political wrangling takes place, is a truly enormous piece of legislation. H.R. 6938.
Right.
This is the Commerce, Justice, Science, Energy and Water Development, and Interior and Environment Appropriations Act 2026. It's an omnibus bill in everything but name.
Oh, absolutely. It is the operational fuel for huge swaths of the federal government. To give you a sense of scale.
Please do.
This bill covers everything from funding for the Department of Justice's legal activities,
Yep.
including the controversial administration of pardon and clemency petitions we'll get to later, to the core operational budgets for scientific research, energy production, natural resource management. We're talking about vast sums of money.
Just astronomical numbers.
For example, the bill allocates something like $8.4 billion just for the Department of Energy's Office of Science. That's funding everything from basic research to the operation of our national labs.
Wow. That's a huge commitment to research infrastructure, and that doesn't even touch the environmental side of things.
Not even close. Within that energy and water development title alone, the bill dedicates over $7.3 billion for atomic energy defense environmental cleanup.
And what does that actually mean?
Well, these are the decades-long necessary expenses related to handling nuclear waste and cleaning up those Cold War-era production sites you see across the country. And then, under the Interior and Environment title, we see necessary expenses for the National Forest System, the EPA, the national parks.
So basically the bills that keep the federal government running, staffing, and protecting the lands we all use.
Exactly.
And procedurally, how did this massive bill get handled?
It was considered under House Resolution 977, which packaged H.R. 6938 with two other measures.
Oh, okay, so a bundling.
Right. This bundling, they often call it a structured rule.
Yes.
It's pretty standard practice to move big legislation and, limit the number of amendments that can be offered.
And what were those other two measures?
H.R. 4593, which deals with regulatory reform around water standards in shower heads. A surprisingly intense, detailed debate.
We will definitely get to that.
And H.R. 5184, which is about efficiency standards for affordable housing.
Now, what's fascinating here, and I think essential for anyone trying to understand how this all works, is the discussion around congressional earmarks.
Yes.
We see Mr. Arrington offer a notice of certification. He's stating that H.R. 6938 contained no congressional earmarks, no limited tax benefits, or limited tariff benefits as defined in the rules.
A very formal procedural statement asserting compliance.
So wait a minute. If that's true, Why does the record immediately follow this statement with these extensive tables detailing dozens of individual community projects funding allocations? I mean, we're talking about money targeted toward specific local police departments, specific university centers, the specific community groups. Isn't that functionally an earmark?
That is the crucial point of, I guess you could call it procedural hypocrisy. The key takeaway here is that Congress has found a way to politically ban earmarks while functionally restoring them through a semantic loophole.
So they changed the name.
Pretty much.
Oh.
Rule XXI's definition of congressional earmark is so narrow, it often excludes funding directed through specific grant programs or agency allocations, that members can secure millions for these localized specific projects, like you said, grants for police car fleets or library programs.
And still say, no earmarks here.
And still offer a procedurally compliant certification. They have restored localized, targeted federal spending, which we all used to call earmarks, under the politically safer label of community project funding.
So the letter of the law is met, but the spirit of the no earmark rule is just completely circumvented. Why is Congress tolerating this linguistic sleight of hand?
Because it's politically expedient. I mean, members of both parties genuinely believe that targeted local spending is necessary for infrastructure and community needs. It's something that was lost during that brief earmark ban era.
They missed it.
They did. So by relabeling it, they satisfy the public demand for transparency while maintaining the functional ability to deliver highly specific benefits to their districts, which is, a core component of getting reelected.
Of course. Okay, let's zoom in on a piece of procedural maneuvering that signals, just extraordinary internal tension within the House.
Yes.
We saw Mr. Jeffries rise to provide notice of intent to offer a motion to discharge the committee on rules from further consideration of a certain House Resolution 780. This sounds like parliamentary warfare.
It truly is. The discharge petition is one of the most powerful and therefore rarely used tools available to the minority or even a frustrated majority faction.
So how does it work?
As we mentioned, bills like HRS 780 can get intentionally stuck in the very powerful Rules Committee by leadership. They just hold it there, preventing it from reaching the floor for a direct vote.
And this motion is aimed specifically at forcing the vote on HRS 780, which, based on the debate we're about to cover, is the vehicle containing the urgently needed ACA healthcare tax credits.
Exactly. So we immediately connect this technical concept to massive policy stakes. Under the rules, if a majority of the House members, that's 218 signatures, which is difficult but possible, sign this petition,
it forces the committee's hand.
It allows the House to discharge the committee and compel a floor vote. This move signals the minority party is ready to exert its collective will against the majority leadership to force a vote on healthcare affordability that leadership has been actively blocking for months.
Now, given how rare this is, what kind of political cost does Mr. Jeffries pay if he announces this intent and then fails to rally the 218 signatures within the 2 legislative days he has?
Oh, the political cost is enormous. Announcing the intent signals a crisis of confidence in the majority's ability to govern. It's effectively calling their bluff.
And if they don't have the votes?
If the minority can't get that majority of the House to join them, meaning they fail to peel off enough moderate members from the majority side, it shows a weakness in their coalition and allows the majority to claim victory in procedural control.
So it's a high-risk, high-reward move.
You don't undertake it lightly.
Yeah.
They must believe they are close to the 218.
Okay, from the high-stakes game of procedural chess, let's examine moments when congressional will was completely overridden by the executive branch. The veto override vote. The House held roll number 7 on overriding the president's veto of a bill related to the Miccosukee Reserved Area, and the vote was overwhelmingly supportive, 397 yeas to 28 nays.
That vote tally, 397 to 28, demonstrates near unanimous, overwhelming bipartisan consensus.
It's a blowout.
It is. However, this is where technical mechanics define policy outcomes. Overriding a presidential veto requires a 2/3 majority in both the House and the Senate.
And even with that huge vote?
Even with that huge vote down, the 2/3 threshold was not met, and the veto was sustained. The will of Congress was nullified.
Let's delve into the policy stakes here. Mrs. L. Lee of Florida spoke so passionately about the Miccosukee bill, H.R. 504. Why did it command such broad support, and why on earth did the president veto it?
Well, the bill was narrow, it was targeted, and it was really essential for the Miccosukee tribe's sovereignty and, their immediate community safety.
Okay.
It aimed to expand the reserved area to include a place called Osceola Camp. This expansion would, first, strengthen the tribe's ability to self-govern their ancestral lands, and second, directly address serious flooding concerns that threaten the village.
A village often hit hard during storm season.
Severely impacted. And this bill was previously approved unanimously by both chambers. It was not controversial legislation at all.
And the president's rationale for the veto was highly criticized. Measley called it an act of revenge.
And that's because the president's veto statement entirely bypassed the merits of the bill. Mrs. Lee argued that the veto was an explicit retaliation against the Miccosukee tribe for two primary reasons.
What were they?
First, for actions they took to protect the Everglades, their homeland, from environmental risks which conflicted with administration policy. And second, for opposing the president's unpopular immigration policies.
So the implication is deeply troubling. That the executive power of the veto was used not to uphold constitutional or fiscal principles, but to punish a sovereign tribal nation for political disagreement.
That's the allegation, yes. It's an incredibly serious one.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it suggests the executive branch is willing to use its constitutional power not for governance, but for, petty political vendettas, regardless of the consequences.
It raises a very important question about the abuse of executive power and the reliability of federal commitments. And this wasn't an isolated incident.
Right. Mr. CRO of Colorado also criticized the sustained veto on a bill affecting the Arkansas Valley Conduit.
Another one.
The Arkansas Valley Conduit, that's a massive generational project aimed at bringing clean drinking water to numerous communities in Colorado, right?
That's right. And Mr. Crow noted this project represents a 60-year federal commitment. The veto, which also stood despite bipartisan support, just ignored decades of policy stability.
And he pointed out a major irony, didn't he?
He did. Crow highlighted that the veto contradicted the president's own administration's past actions. President Trump had previously celebrated the groundbreaking for this very project back in 2020.
So this illustrates a consistent pattern of the executive branch using its veto power to override congressional consensus and longstanding infrastructure commitments based on what? Shifting political winds.
That's the argument being made. So whether it's a tribal land expansion or a 60-year water commitment in the West, the message sent to local communities is clear. Federal commitment is highly unreliable when it comes to presidential political grievance.
And that erosion of trust is as damaging as the policy setback itself.
It fundamentally undermines the trust that communities need to plan for their futures, especially when you're talking about vital resources like water and land sovereignty.
Okay, that brings us to our second major theme for this deep dive, memory.
Hmm.
January 6, 2026 marked the 5-year anniversary of the attack on the Capitol, and the congressional record captures an intensely emotional and fiercely partisan debate over the meaning of that day.
This is where the two realities of Washington just collide most dramatically. You have constitutional governance on one side and the raw human consequence of political violence on the other.
And the contrast between members who came to the floor seeking accountability and those who seemed determined to rewrite the history was immediate and profound.
And the debate centered so heavily on the administration's policy of offering blanket pardons to those convicted of involvement in the insurrection.
So starting with the House floor commemorations, we heard from Mr. Latimer of New York, and he rose specifically targeting these blanket pardons.
Latimer's speech was incredibly direct. He called the pardons a slap in the face to the dedicated law enforcement officers who defended Congress and the Constitution.
He mentioned specific officers, didn't he?
He did. He reminded the House of the sacrifice of individuals like Officer Brian Sicknick, a New Jersey native who tragically died following injuries he sustained during the attack.
And what was his core message?
Latimer stressed the urgent need to preserve historical truth, stating that Congress cannot let Donald Trump and his allies rewrite the history of one of the darkest moments in the 250-year history of this nation.
Then Ms. Capture of Ohio, she added some crucial specificity to this debate by honoring the bravery of law enforcement and focusing on the sentences handed down to 2 individuals.
Yes, 2 individuals involved in the worst violence at the Lower West Terrace Tunnel, which was the site of some of the most brutal fighting that day.
And she provided these really stark examples of the violence.
She did. She named David Dempsey, who was sentenced to 20 years for viciously assaulting officers using improvised weapons like, broken furniture, pepper spray, and flagpoles.
Just brutal.
And then she turned her focus to Daniel Joseph Rodriguez, who received 12.5 years for dragging and repeatedly shocking Officer Michael Fanone in the neck with a taser.
An act we all saw on camera. And the critical detail here is that Rodriguez was among those pardoned.
Exactly. Capture explicitly noted that Rodriguez was pardoned, and she quoted the chief of the Capitol Police, who called those executive actions deeply troubling.
So that directly links the administration's pardon policy to a betrayal of the officers who were injured.
It sets up this sharp conflict between the executive branch and the law enforcement community it is sworn to protect.
This theme of accountability versus historical revisionism continued with Mrs. M.C. Beath of Georgia. She reminded us of the context of the riot. Rioters seeking to overthrow the certified will of the people, and the fact that the individual responsible for promoting those baseless allegations once again occupies the highest office.
And Mrs. McBath concluded her remarks with a powerful, reflective moment, quoting Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
What was the quote?
"We are going to be made to repent in this generation, not just for the vitriolic words and deeds of bad people, but for the appalling silence of good people."
A clear shot across the bow, intended to pressure members of the Republican caucus to acknowledge the gravity of the events.
To speak out against the attempts to minimize or, glorify the actions of the rioters.
And speaking of that minimization, here is the profound philosophical gulf in Congress, captured by Mr. Loudermilk of Georgia.
Yes.
He took the floor, and he defended his actions that day, objecting to the electoral results.
Loudermilk articulated the viewpoint that the events of January 6th did not change his serious concerns regarding election integrity.
So what was his justification?
He stated that he was proud to object to the results in 6 states because of the procedures those states used to conduct their elections, and he affirmed he was, quote, proud to stand for our election laws and to stand with President Trump.
So for a significant part of the Republican caucus, the violence of the day is secondary to what they perceive as a failure of election fairness.
That's the argument, that the objection was a necessary constitutional duty, not an incitement to insurrection.
Okay, let's move to the Senate. If the House debate was politically pointed, the Senate floor provided, just chilling testimonies. Mr. Schiff of California recounted his vivid personal experience from the House chamber on January 6, 2021.
And Schiff was one of the key players in the opposition to decertification. He was present on the floor as a manager. And he recounted the almost surreal speed of the events.
What did he describe?
Looking up and seeing Speaker Pelosi and then Steny Hoyer removed so quickly, knowing they were primary targets. He described hearing the banging on doors and trying to get in.
And the panic.
The sudden panic as Capitol Police rushed the members to get out their gas masks, and he noted the difficulty everyone had, including staff, in just opening the masks in the urgency of the moment.
That one detail, the physical struggle to open the gas mask, it brings the chaos and fear of the moment into such sharp relief.
Absolutely. Schiff's core message, though, was forward-looking. He stressed that democracy's strength relies not just on laws, but on the resolve and courage of its leaders.
And he argued that those who attempted to overturn the election or now support the pardons failed that test.
Right. He also condemned the continuous political effort to turn the criminals into martyrs, which echoes the concerns raised by House Democrats.
Then Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, he provided the statistical backbone to the condemnation of the pardons. He called the actions an endorsement of political violence.
Blumenthal just laid out the facts. The president has pardoned more than 1,500 individuals associated with the events of January 6th.
1,500.
But what makes this politically devastating is the follow-up data. He noted that within a year of being pardoned and put back on the streets, several of these individuals had been rearrested for new, serious crimes.
What kind of crimes are we talking about here? Minor infractions?
Not at all. Blumenthal explicitly listed charges ranging from soliciting a minor to plotting the murder of the FBI agents who investigated him to killing someone while driving drunk and burglary.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the administration isn't just undermining the constitutional order by intervening in the justice system.
No, it's actively undermining public safety by releasing individuals who quickly returned to violent or criminal behavior. This transforms the pardon debate from one of historical grievance into one of immediate public order failure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Senate Majority Leader Schumer of New York tied the violence directly back to the Oval Office, emphasizing the attack was instigated by the current president.
Schumer, who mentioned he's the son of 2 cops, described the pardons over 1,000 individuals, many of whom actively attacked officers, as insulting to him personally and to law enforcement across the nation.
And he had a warning, didn't he?
He did. His warning was particularly focused on the psychological damage. The risk that young people susceptible to propaganda will be misled into thinking the perpetrators were heroes who were vindicated by a presidential pardon, thereby normalizing political violence.
Perhaps the most poignant moment in the entire record for this anniversary came from Senator Durbin of Illinois. He shifted the focus from the perpetrators to the ultimate victims.
Durbin read the names of officers who lost their lives in the aftermath. He specifically named Officer Brian Sicknick, and then he detailed the 4 officers who died by suicide following the attack. He stressed they were so traumatized by this seed of democracy being attacked by a mob that they lost their lives. And then he shared a deeply personal anecdote about one of those officers, Howie Levengood.
What was the anecdote?
Durbin shared that he would see Howie every morning at the Delaware door and described him as this cheerful guy, always quick with a smile and a joke, who loved this place as if it were his home.
It personalizes the tragedy. It transforms the statistic into a story of an individual who was a cherished part of the congressional community.
And it emphasizes that irreversible human cost of the political division.
In a moment of rare unifying action that sharply contrasted with all that floor rhetoric, the Senate agreed to S-Res 580, recognizing those heroes.
A critical bipartisan resolution introduced by Mr. Merkley of Oregon and Mr. Tillis of North Carolina.
So it was more than just thanks.
Much more. It expressed deep institutional gratitude to the U.S. Capitol Police, the Metropolitan Police Department, and all supporting law enforcement. But more than that, they moved forward on a tangible act of remembrance, a plaque.
Right, and Durbin provided the details on that plaque effort.
The resolution directs the architect of the Capitol to prominently display the authorized plaque, which was initially authorized way back in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022 in a publicly accessible location on the second floor of the Senate wing.
And that's temporary.
Yes, temporary until a permanent designated location can be established on the western front of the Capitol. This action signals a clear institutional resolve to ensure the sacrifice of those officers is permanently marked and protected from the historical revisionism that dominated parts of the floor debate.
Okay, moving from historical remembrance to immediate policy needs, our theme of money comes roaring back. One of the fiercest debates revolved around health care, specifically the expiring Affordable Care Act tax credits.
And this was the driving force behind that procedural skirmish for the discharge motion we discussed in Section 1.
Exactly. The Democratic caucus was laser-focused on the urgency of the situation. Mrs. DeLauro of Connecticut, Mr. Magaziner of Rhode Island, and Mr. Pallone of New Jersey, they led the charge.
They were demanding immediate action to extend the ACA enhanced premium tax credits, which had expired only 7 days prior. They were explicitly trying to use the appropriations bill, H.R. 6938, as the necessary vehicle.
And they made the economic stakes for American families crystal clear, didn't they?
Oh, the stakes were immediate and potentially catastrophic for millions of families using the marketplace. If Congress failed to act, the enhanced subsidies, which cap premium payments at 8.5% of income, would just vanish.
So what does that look like for a real family?
For a hypothetical family of 4 making $130,000, their monthly marketplace premium could potentially double or even triple. We're talking about going from around $921 to almost $2,000 per month.
That kind of financial shock forces people to drop coverage.
Absolutely. It leads to massive disruptions in stability and health outcomes. Ms. DeLauro was emphatic. Healthcare is a basic and fundamental human right.
And Democrats also strongly criticized Republican leadership for procedural stalling, claiming they were using legislative maneuvers to prevent a clean vote on affordability.
Mr. M.C. Jevern of Massachusetts was particularly sharp. He said they had waited months while the Republican leadership of this House dragged their feet.
And he made a striking allegation.
He did. He said leadership literally shut down the entire government rather than just allow this one vote on making sure that regular people can afford their health care.
So he's framing the procedural delay as a direct act of cruelty against working families.
That's exactly how he framed it.
Now, on the other side, Republicans were equally vocal, but their critique was aimed not at the need for affordable health care, but at the structure of the ACA itself.
Right. Mr. Smith of Missouri and Mr. Herodopoulos of Florida were the primary voices here. Their core argument is that the ACA subsidy structure is fundamentally flawed, wasteful, and designed to enrich corporations rather than help patients.
They claim that Democrats created the healthcare crisis by prioritizing insurance company profits.
Exactly. And they pointed to data suggesting significant fraud and waste within the system.
Let's flesh out that specific claim. The one that more than half of subsidized individuals didn't file a medical claim.
Okay, so that claim, which Republicans cited from internal studies, suggests that more than 50% of the people receiving massive subsidies through the insurance exchanges did not file a single medical claim in the previous year.
Yet the insurance companies still received all that federal money for their premiums.
Exactly. Mr. Herodopoulos used this to emphasize that not $1 goes to them, the American people. It all goes to the big health insurance companies.
So the argument is that this structure artificially inflates the cost of premiums for everyone else and basically guarantees profits for insurers.
It treats taxpayer money as a corporate subsidy stream. So the Republican opposition isn't just about fiscal prudence. It's a philosophical rejection of the ACA's design.
They argue it drives up the underlying cost of care rather than reforming the system.
It reframes the debate entirely. And furthermore, the appropriations bill became a vehicle for other policy debates.
Of course.
Mr. Smith of Missouri used the debate to demand that Hyde Amendment protections be added to the bill.
Which prevents taxpayer funds from subsidizing abortion.
Correct. By insisting on this addition, Republicans ensured that the massive appropriations package could not move forward until this ideologically charged provision was settled, further layering the political complexity onto the debate.
All right, moving from life or death policy to the seemingly mundane but politically charged regulatory battles, we saw intense debate surrounding shower heads and energy efficiency standards encapsulated in H.R. 4593, the Saving Homeowners from Overregulation with Exceptional Rinsing Act.
You can't make that name up.
You cannot. It's amazing that amidst a constitutional crisis and a massive appropriations bill, Congress still finds time to debate the quality of our morning rinse. It truly shows that no regulation is too small for Capitol Hill.
It sounds trivial, but it really does represent a core ideological fault line over administrative power.
So what were the two sides?
Mrs. Castor of Florida criticized H.R. 4593, citing the president's past comments about redoing the Lincoln bathroom with gold shower heads and weakening water conservation measures. She argued these changes are detrimental.
Making conservation harder, raising utility costs.
Exactly. But the bill's sponsor, Mr. F.R.Y. of South Carolina, he provided the procedural context that makes this a constitutional debate rather than just a plumbing debate.
And what was that?
Mr. Fry explained that the bill's objective is simply to restore the definition of a showerhead that was established by Congress way back in 1975.
Okay.
He argued forcefully that the Obama administration, through the Department of Energy, illegally reinvented the definition of a showerhead via unelected bureaucrats.
So by changing the interpretation of showerhead to mean a device with multiple nozzles,
the administration effectively bypassed Congress's original statutory mandate on efficiency standards. Our point is that if policy changes are necessary, they must originate from the legislative branch, not administrative fiat. It's a pure separation of powers issue.
And this regulatory pushback extends to broader energy policy as well. Mr. Cloud of Texas argued that blue states often face the highest energy costs because of self-imposed, terrible state-local energy regulations.
And he connected this argument directly to the energy component of the appropriations package. Mr. Cloud highlighted the massive scale of potential energy disruption caused by environmental regulations.
He gave a specific number, right?
He did. He said that 112 gigawatts of power are scheduled to go offline in the next decade.
To put 112 gigawatts into perspective, that's enough capacity to power something like 80 million homes.
Or the entire industrial base of several large states combined. It's a staggering amount.
And losing that much baseline capacity, which includes reliable sources like coal and older natural gas plants, is the core Republican argument for restructuring energy policy within this bill.
It is. They advocate for increased investment in reliable sources like nuclear power and oil and gas infrastructure, aiming to make energy cheaper and more affordable, contrasting their approach with the restrictive policies of high-cost states.
Okay, now let's pivot and fulfill that local connection promise by looking directly at H.R. 6938's appropriations tables.
The community project funding.
Exactly. The details that show how this bill functionally keeps communities running regardless of the ideological battles raging on the floor.
This is the granular reality of governance, where the massive federal budget actually touches the pavement. And we see these specific, vital allocations all across the country.
Give us some examples.
For instance, in Arizona, where heat is a persistent crisis, the bill allocates $2,062,000 to SkySong Innovations, LLC, at Arizona State University for a Center for Heat Preparedness.
A crucial investment for Tempe and Phoenix, and the funding goes directly to public safety as well.
Absolutely. We see funding secured by representatives like Ms. Griswold for local law enforcement needs. There's funding for Tucson first responder vehicle fleet modernization, and a separate grant for the Sahuarita Police Department radio replacement. These are direct, necessary public safety improvements that might not make national headlines, but are vital for daily life.
What about the East Coast? Mr. Jeffries, who we mentioned leading the charge for the discharge petition, he secured significant funding for his Brooklyn district.
He did. The allocations for New York include $1,039,000 for the Brooklyn Public Library literacy programs, a crucial investment in education and community uplift.
Okay.
And $1,031,000 to the Kings County District Attorney's Office Project Restore, which is aimed at criminal justice reform and rehabilitation in Brooklyn. Highly specific community investments.
And Florida, always concerned with environmental issues, saw targeted research money flowing.
Florida funding is heavily tied to its unique environmental threats. The bill includes $1,064,500 for Florida Gulf Coast University for a Southwest Florida hurricane and red tide instrumentation network.
Essential infrastructure for predicting and mitigating two of the region's greatest threats.
Without a doubt. Additionally, $1,750,000 was allocated for the East Coast Zoological Society Sea Turtle Care and Research Complex in Brevard County, underscoring the federal role in conservation.
And the public safety investments continue in the South Carolina district of Mr. FRY, who championed the showerhead bill.
That's right. Mr. FRY successfully secured $868,040 for the Marlborough County Sheriff's Office Technology and Equipment Upgrade Project, and another $360,106 for the Hartsville Police Department equipment and vehicles.
And Ohio, too.
In Ohio, Representative Joy Ouye secured $4,200,000 for the Lake County Public Safety Center technology enhancements. It just demonstrates that regardless of the ideological fight on the floor, members are successfully delivering fundamental public safety dollars back home.
Finally, the infrastructure component, particularly water projects, is truly national.
We see critical, high-dollar water infrastructure across varied states. $8 million is going to Petersburg Borough, Alaska, for wastewater treatment facility upgrades, supported by Senator Murkowski.
And in New York,
Representative Latimer secured $1,092,000 for the village of Bronxville, New York, for stormwater drainage improvement. It's a reminder that while the headline debate might be about these ideological wars, the practical, tangible benefits for local communities often rely on these quiet, formalized funding mechanisms embedded deep within the appropriations text.
Okay, that brings us to our final theme, monarchy. This addresses the firestorm over foreign policy, where the congressional record documents an aggressive military raid on Caracas, a raid resulting in the capture and deposition of Nicolas Maduro and his wife.
And this forced an immediate, raw, and constitutional debate about the executive power to unilaterally deploy military force.
This is perhaps the most constitutionally significant event covered in the record this week, isn't it?
I think so. It forced Congress to confront the definition of war and the separation of powers. And the debate was so intense because the action was definitive and carried out without any prior authorization or notification to the legislative branch.
Now, the administration found its staunchest defenders in Congress, notably Mr. Thune of South Dakota, who commended the operation as an amazing display of American strength.
The Thune's defense really dismissed the constitutional criticisms as secondary to effective foreign policy. He argued the president was simply removing an indicted narco-terrorist.
An action he claimed Democrats themselves had called for in the past.
Right, including Senator Schumer and former President Joe Biden. And Thune explicitly cited Walter Russell Meade, claiming the dazzling nature of the operation will do more to shore up American power and world peace than all the best speeches President Obama ever made.
So the underlying message is an assertion that unilateral executive might, when it's successful, is a superior method of projecting American influence than careful diplomacy.
That's the argument. Yet the Democratic response, particularly in the Senate, was just unified in constitutional alarm.
Led by Mr. Kaine of Virginia. And what made the Venezuela operation a true constitutional crisis was not just the use of force, but the specific, deeply cynical allegation regarding the motive.
That synthesis is key. Senator Kaine immediately introduced SJRS 98, a joint resolution to direct the removal of U.S. armed forces from hostilities against Venezuela not authorized by Congress.
His argument invoked the very foundations of the American Republic.
It did. The decision to go to war, the gravest decision the government makes, must never be entrusted to one person. The founders placed that power in Article 1 with the Congress, specifically to make it difficult to enter conflicts, to prevent the executive from acting like a king or a monarch.
And Kane differentiated this event from a simple arrest warrant. He argued the scale of force indicated something far larger.
He detailed the overwhelming military commitment: boat strikes against Venezuelan forces, the strategic amassing of 20% of the American Navy around Venezuela, and the deployment of 150 aircraft operating from 20 bases.
This was not a surgical strike.
He argued it was a large-scale military invasion. And the definitive proof, he said, was the subsequent U.S. declaration that it would occupy and control the Venezuelan economy, its oil reserves.
And that moves the action squarely from law enforcement to an act of war and economic occupation, bypassing Congress completely.
Completely.
And Senator Schumer explicitly introduced the element of motive, alleging that the operation was about seizing Venezuela's oil and profiting from it.
And that's the critical integration. Opponents questioned the president's stated anti-narco-trafficking motives, pointing to his prior action of pardoning a former Honduran drug trafficking president.
So they're arguing the operation serves domestic oil company interests who were reportedly promised favorable treatment during the 2024 campaign.
Exactly. So the constitutional alarm is intensified by the allegation that the executive branch was risking war and bypassing Congress specifically to serve domestic corporate interests, essentially trading constitutional fidelity for campaign promises.
And beyond the constitutional crisis, there were massive concerns about budgetary transparency, weren't there?
Yes, connecting the war powers debate directly back to the article Why Power the Purse. Mr. Kane repeatedly demanded transparency regarding the billions of dollars spent.
What was his specific demand?
He stated that the executive branch had withdrawn taxpayer dollars without a vote or notification to Congress, specifically utilizing existing Department of Defense accounts that are meant for immediate emergencies, not long-term occupation.
And he put that demand on the public record.
For the third time, asking the Department of Defense to detail exactly which accounts were used for the Venezuela operations in both fiscal years 2025 and 2026. If the funds were drawn down from accounts Congress intended for other purposes, that represents both a constitutional and a severe budgetary crisis.
Now, if we connect this action to the bigger picture of American strategy, Mr. Bennett of Colorado warned that the administration's focus on unilateral dominance is actually undermining the global order.
Bennett cautioned against the administration's narrow focus on asserting dominance only in the Western Hemisphere, a strategy he derisively called the Donroe Doctrine, a cynical nod to the Monroe Doctrine.
His argument being that if the U.S. asserts that unilateral might is right in its own neighborhood,
it immediately gives free rein to rivals like Russia and China to do the same in their respective spheres of influence. This abandonment of international law and order, he warned, will eventually reverberate globally, creating a more dangerous and unstable world.
And for a brief moment of levity mixed with genuine tension, the record also noted the president's aggressive actions weren't limited to hostile nations, but extended to close allies like Greenland.
That's the strange side note to all this aggression. The president has repeatedly threatened the invasion or purchase of Greenland since the beginning of his term.
And the record quotes Greenland's prime minister,
who stated flatly that threats, pressures, and talk of annexation have no place between friends. It just serves as a stark reminder that the aggressive, unilateral executive action seen in Venezuela is part of a pattern that alarms even close Democratic allies.
All right, for our last section, let's move away from the noise of the floor, the constitutional crises, and the political score settling, and into the quiet, formalized work of Congress, the extensions of remarks.
This section fulfills that local connection promise brilliantly. It shows the deep, often bipartisan commitment lawmakers have to recognizing the specific people, businesses, and institutions that form the bedrock of their communities.
These are written statements, right? Formally submitted directly into the congressional record.
Exactly. Often honoring achievements or mourning losses that would otherwise never reach a national stage. They're a real window into the hyperlocal values and priorities of a representative's district.
So let's start with community journalism, which is struggling nationwide. Senator Moran of Kansas submitted a statement about the sadness and the demise of his hometown paper, the Plainville Times.
So, while not spoken on the floor, Senator Moran submitted a statement emphasizing the paper's history in the town of Plainville, population 1,746. It published its final standalone edition before merging with the Stockton Sentinel.
What did he praise about it?
He praised community journalism for leaving lasting marks on the rural towns they cover, despite workforce struggles and financial strains. And he specifically noted the unique role community journalists play, often filling multiple reporting, editing, and distribution roles simply because the need exists and nobody else would do it.
So the tribute is a recognition of the loss of institutional memory and the community hub when a paper closes.
A huge loss.
We also see tributes to multi-generational family businesses achieving incredible longevity. In Pennsylvania, Representative Smucker submitted a statement celebrating the centennial anniversary of Roots Country Market.
Yes, while not spoken on the floor, Mr. Smucker submitted a statement emphasizing that Roots Country Market started modestly in 1925 as a poultry auction.
And now?
Now, 100 years later, it has just exploded into this massive community institution and economic driver, seeing up to 10,000 visitors weekly across its 250 stands, flea market, and 2 auctions.
And the tribute frames the market's growth as being rooted in family values and community commitment.
It does. It underscores the importance of tradition and local commerce. And we also saw recognition for another Pennsylvania institution, Centerville Produce.
Also celebrating a centennial.
While not spoken on the floor, a statement emphasized its centennial, having also started in 1925 just selling cream and eggs. Now it's a comprehensive agriculture, retail, and pet supply hub.
It seems like there's a real pride in the local agricultural history and entrepreneurial spirit of Pennsylvania.
Clearly.
Let's turn to innovation and community service efforts in the Midwest. An Iowa manufacturing business, Kinetic Technologies, was recognized for its local engagement.
So while not spoken on the floor, a statement recognized Kinetic Technologies in Algona, Iowa, for its innovation and crucial adaptability in the manufacturing sector. But the tribute focused heavily on their commitment to community workforce development.
How so?
It specifically noted their support for a robotics class at the local high school and partnering with the local Future Farmers of America chapter. It highlights how businesses are directly investing in the next generation of skilled labor in rural America.
And on the public health front, we recognize a major quantifiable achievement in Florida regarding mental health services.
A really important one. While not spoken on the floor, Mr. Bill Rockus of Florida submitted a statement recognizing Pasco County Community Development for receiving the prestigious Audrey Nelson Award for its Behavioral Health Urgent Care Center.
And the significance here is that this was the first behavioral health UCC in Florida.
The first. And it served 12,274 adults in its first year, exceeding expectations by 183%. And most critically, successfully diverted a staggering 94% of those served from more acute, expensive, and often traumatizing inpatient settings.
That is a measurable life-saving impact.
It really demonstrates the effectiveness of proactive local care models. And we also saw recognition for the Chicago Indo-U.S. Lions Club. While not spoken on the floor, Mr. Krishnamurthy of Illinois submitted a statement recognizing the club's outstanding community service, particularly its focus on specific public health initiatives, including comprehensive vision, hearing, and diabetes care within the Chicago area.
It really underscores the vital role of local nonprofits and volunteer organizations in filling public health gaps.
It absolutely does.
Finally, we turn to personal tributes and legacies, which always bring an element of reflection to the record. There was deep sorrow over the recent loss of a colleague, Representative Doug LaMalfa of California.
Yes, numerous members rose or submitted remarks to pay tribute to the late representative, often calling him the gentle giant.
What was he remembered for?
He was universally remembered for his fierce dedication to agriculture, natural resources, and rural communities, known especially for chairing the Congressional Western Caucus. Colleagues emphasized his personal warmth, his principled character, and his directness in a town that often lacks clarity.
This public honoring process is so vital for the institution, isn't it? It allows members to recognize the human cost and the shared community of service.
It really is. And we also saw tributes to long-serving institutional figures who are retiring.
Like whom?
Tributes were paid to the long service of retiring Representative Steny Hoyer of Maryland, a figure whose service included time as president of the Maryland State Senate, which just highlights the depth of his legislative experience.
And someone from Idaho as well.
Yes, Senator RSCH and others honored Dr. Rick Whately for his 32 years of service as Executive Director of Leadership Idaho Agriculture and his half-century of continuous advocacy for Idaho's farmers and ranchers.
These remarks really underscore the immense, often unseen human infrastructure that supports and informs the legislative process.
They link elected officials to the expertise of their communities.
Okay, so this deep dive into the congressional record of January 6th and 7th, 2026 has provided a profound look at the conflicts currently defining Washington.
It really has.
Yeah.
We saw the raw, visceral emotion and the constitutional arguments surrounding the memory of January 6th and the aggressive use of presidential power in the Venezuela intervention.
And starkly contrasted against those ideological and existential crises, We saw the relentless, meticulous focus on granular local governance.
The funding for Arizona's Heat Preparedness Center, the fight to keep ACA coverage affordable, and the celebration of 100-year-old family businesses in Pennsylvania.
The central tension here lies in the gap between federal inaction, those frustrating months of stalling a vote on extending vital ACA healthcare tax credit.
All through procedural maneuvering.
Exactly. A gap between that inaction and the aggressive, arguably overreaching executive action, exemplified by the unilateral Venezuelan military operation and those controversial attempts to reverse regulations on energy efficiency.
It raises an important question for you, the listener, and for us all. The formal record shows Congress grappling with two different realities, one of immediate physical and political peril, and another of hyper-local, granular governance.
So what does it mean for our democracy when the most intensely partisan, divisive battles are waged on the floor over constitutional authority and historical truth?
Yet the practical, tangible benefits for local communities, clean water, police equipment, behavioral health centers, often rely on these quiet, formalized funding mechanisms and specialized definitions that bypass the big ideological fights. Does it mean the real work of Congress is done in the shadows of procedural rules, while the floor serves only for political theater?
The record is open for interpretation, but never for silence. You can look up these specific remarks, the full text of H.R. 6938, and the complete congressional record for these dates. That's January 6th through 9th, 2026, at congress.gov.
We encourage you to keep reading, keep digging, and keep connecting the context of Congress to your community. That's our deep dive for today.